Yes, a remarkable effort by this Norwegian, isn't he? Scandinavian, Erling Haaland with his 35th goal. And I guess he's not finished yet because they still have, I think, at least another 4 matches to play in the Premier League. And he'll be keen to add to that tally. I think the total, if you go back, of course, the Premier League's only been going since, I think, the early 1990s. But if you go back 100 years, I think there was a fellow, I can't remember his name now, I think he got 62 in one season back in the 1920s or something like that. And there's been one or two that have got 40s. But in this modern era, and I suppose that's all that counts because you can't really compare pitches or the facilities or the technologies, the quality of the balls, for example, and the quality of the pitches with what was taking place 40, 50, 60 years ago. But in the modern day period of the last 30 years, 35 goals in a season is a remarkable record. I can think of a team in the middle of the table this year who haven't scored 35 goals from the season amongst them all. So it's a remarkable performance there by Haaland. Anyway, let's catch up with I did catch up earlier today with our football commentator from the UK, Andy Buckley, and said to him that it was a very special day, not just for Man City, but probably also for Norwegian football.
Indeed, yeah. I was lucky enough to be there to witness history. Erling Haaland with his 35th Premier League goal, a modern-day record. I also went to West Ham, actually, on the opening day of the season. I was working for radio there at the Olympic Stadium. It seems an awful long time ago, right at the start of last August, when he scored 2 goals, one of them a penalty. And he'd drawn a blank, actually, the week before against Liverpool in the Community Shield when he wore the blue shirt for the first time. And because he hadn't scored in one game, all the pundits were saying, well, is he going to adapt to English football? And is he cut out for playing in the English league? And, well, I think he's answered it fairly emphatically with the way that he's performed over the winter months. And, a great goal as well, the second goal against West Ham. But it wasn't plain sailing for Manchester City because I was there with my wife and my son, and it was nervous times, fairly anxious for the crowd of 50-odd thousand at the Etihad because West Ham, fair play to them, without Declan Rice, their anchor man, a guy that you'd need against the champions. And yet West Ham frustrated City for long periods. 0-0 at half-time. De Bruyne wasn't playing. Nathan Ake was back. But City just not a vintage performance, but you're not going to turn it on week in, week out. And I think the fans turn up expecting to see the side score a bag full of goals. It doesn't always happen that way. And there are going to be nights, here we are in May and it was a cold, chilly evening in Manchester. Surprise, surprise. But eventually they got the job done. And the big talking point, as you mentioned, Erling Haaland, 35 league goals, 51 goals for the season, but only modern day because I can't remember Dixie Dean, I can't remember John Charles, but they scored more goals than Erling Haaland did. Different eras, but modern day. Some people, of course, think that the Premier League only started, it started in 1992, but football only started in the early 90s, which of course it didn't. And traditionalists like me and old-timers will celebrate the fact that we've got a great pantheon of goal scorers. He beat the record that Andy Cole held. A great night, really, and a great moment for English football. And he's done it in his debut season in England.
What's the record going back prior to the current formation of the competition to the days of the old First Division? Was it 42 in a season? Was that the individual record?
Yeah, Dixie Dean, I think, in the 20s scored 60 goals, and
wow.
His family is still quite active on Twitter, reminding everybody when there's people are saying, well, Erling Haaland set this record, and say, oh, hang on a minute, old Dixie Dean. Different times, of course, even going back to the 70s and the 80s, it's different times, different pitches, different game, different fitness. Would George Best? How would George Best get on today? I suppose that's one of the kind of key questions. And to me, George Best was the best player I ever saw in my life. But would he survive? If you're talking Manchester City comparisons, Colin Bell was the king of the Kippax, the famous old stand at Manchester City's ground main road. And some would say Colin Bell was the best player ever to play for Manchester City, but I don't know. I think I've seen quite a few contenders to eclipse him in the last few seasons, the likes of Vincent Kompany, the likes of Sergio Aguero, and for me, the best player, even eclipsing Erling Haaland, is Kevin De Bruyne. I just think that man is absolute quality.